Bede. Glenn. Prue. Good morning, everyone. Atamarie. Welcome to this council meeting. If I could have some order in the room, please. In the public gallery, please. Could we have some quiet? Thank you. Welcome to this council meeting of the 10th of October 2023. Welcome to elected members, councillors, community board chairs, staff, and a large contingent in the public gallery ready for the living wage discussion today. Thank you for coming. We're looking forward to an effective and respectful meeting today. And to kick us off, I'd like to invite Councillor Handford to do a karakia, council blessing.
Ia mātou e whiriwhiri ana i ngā take kei mua i o mātou aro e pono ana mātou ka kaha tonu ki te whakapau mahara hua pai mo ngā hapore e mahi nei mātou. Me kaha hoki mātou katoa kia whaihua kia tōtika tā mātou mahi, a mā te maia te tiro whakamua me te hihiri kataia, te arahi i roto i te kotahitanga me te aroha.
Kia ora. Next we have apologies. I have an apology from Cam Butler. He's on bereavement leave. Do I have any other apologies? I'll ask for a mover, please. Councillor Kirby, seconded Councillor Handford. All in favour, please say aye. Aye, that's carried. Do we have any declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda today? No. Nothing under 5 or 6. Public speaking time for items relating to the agenda. I'm guessing we're going to have some people from Living Wage Aotearoa. We have Reverend Anna Gilkison. And feel free to bring up some other people for support and just take a seat at the end of the table. Pull up some other chairs if you need to.
No?
It's a shame we can't turn the live stream camera around so we can see that banner and the wonderful contingent of people standing there. Right, when you're ready.
Kia ora, Your Worship, councillors. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak to you this morning. My name is Anna Gilkison and I'm the Minister of Kapiti Uniting Parish, which has churches in Raumati Beach and Waikanai, and a responsibility and a concern for communities from Raumati South to Waikanai. Firstly, I want to say that the reason that I'm here speaking today is that our community activities bring us face to face with the reality of rapidly rising cost of living, and not enough income to meet those costs. So, for example, we have 2 community activities in particular which have shown us just how difficult things are for low-wage workers at the moment. We distribute packages of vegetables for the Veggie Co-op, and we have an opportunity shop that we run at Raumati Beach. Now, the Veggie Co-op vegetables are very much cheaper than those that people can buy in the supermarket, which I'm sure you all agree are extremely expensive. You feel like you have to mortgage your house to go to the supermarket these days. So those vegetables are not nearly so expensive. Nevertheless, what we're finding is that especially the people who have families cannot even afford to pay the Veggie Co-op prices a lot of the time, especially single parents with teenage children. And a lot of those people are low-wage workers in part-time work. But we also find it at the Opportunity Shop, which is a bit of a community hub for people to meet and talk. And it reminds us that low-wage workers are not all young people, nor are they all single parents or people with children. They're also older people in this community who are now increasingly becoming low-wage workers. You see this in the retail industries on Kapiti Coast, because they need to earn some extra to meet the rising cost of living. So we feel very concerned about the level of remuneration that low-wage workers receive as these costs go up. A priest like myself, many centuries ago, famously said, "No one is an island unto themselves. No one is an island unto themselves. Each of us is a part of the whole." So what happens to one happens to all of us. So the well-being of people in this community who are struggling to make ends meet is affecting the well-being of the whole community. It's very expensive to live out here. I've been here a year and a half. I've lived in Wellington and worked in Lower Hutt, lived and worked in Lower Hutt, and it's more expensive out here than any of these areas, apart from housing costs. Partly because there's a kind of drip feed system for costs like paying for your own rubbish collection, paying for water use, which advantages the well-to-do and greatly disadvantages those on a low income. And so if your income is inadequate, each little thing, which in itself may not seem big to you, is like a lead weight being added to the burden on people who just simply do not have enough money to support themselves, let alone any dependents. And so I urge you this morning, I urge you to support the recommendation which has been brought by the council officers to say yes to becoming an accredited living wage employer, in the same way that almost all the councillors in the Wellington region and the Greater Wellington Regional Council have made a decision to become accredited living wage employers. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much. That was a very moving and powerful presentation, and thank you for the work that you do in your parish, to a true community parish that really reaches out. So thank you for the work that you do. Do I have any questions from elected members? There don't appear to be any. I think you made your point very well. So thank you so much, and thank you to everybody who's come in the group at the end of the table there too, and for your advocacy on this. Great, thank you so much. Now via Zoom we have Michael Poland and Tiana Jakicevic. Hi, Michael. Just letting you know before you speak, I'm planning to move this up in the agenda if you want to stick around for a little bit after you've spoken, and maybe introduce yourselves, and then the floor or the screen is yours.
Thank you. My name is Michael. I'm the campaign director for the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty initiative, based on Bundjalung country on the east coast of Australia. Tiana, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, sure. Tēnā rā tātou. Ko Tiana tōku ingoa, he uria hau no ngā tika hununu ki te wairo, no te whakatōhia no ngai tūhui. Engari, e noho ana au ki te moana o Otaki. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kei a koe, Michael. Over to you.
Thank you. So we're really excited to join you today. I wanted to just quickly mention what the global push for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty is, and then Tiana will be able to add some context of what the campaign in Aotearoa is. So I'm sure many of you are aware of the urgent threat of the climate crisis, The primary cause of this crisis is fossil fuels. Coal, oil, and gas are responsible for 86% of emissions in the atmosphere, according to the IPCC. And unfortunately, our global climate agreements, as crucial as they are, do not mention the words fossil fuels, coal, oil, or gas once. Those words are just simply not mentioned in the Paris Agreement. And so there's growing momentum around the need for a new treaty to complement our existing climate negotiations, a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. It's modelled off many other successful treaties that have protected the ozone or addressed the threat of nuclear weapons, landmines, and other dangerous threats. And the proposal has three key pillars. So non-proliferation, creating an agreement for countries to end the expansion of new fossil fuel projects, a fair phase out, creating a global plan for how we will wind down fossil fuel production and transition to clean renewable energy, and having wealthy countries lead that transition, giving more time to developing nations like some of our Pacific neighbours, and then a just transition package. So a global plan to make sure that no communities or workers or countries are left behind, and negotiating that on a global scale. So the proposal has gained a lot of momentum over recent years. It's now backed by a bloc of 8 nation states that's spearheaded by Vanuatu and Tuvalu, and many other Pacific Island nations already support it and will be pushing for its support at the Pacific Island Forum in a month's time. And we've also recently seen Timor-Leste and Antigua and Barbuda formally join that coalition of nations. In addition to them, it's gained support from the World Health Organization, the European Parliament, thousands of organizations around the world, thousands of scientists and academics, Nobel laureates, many, many people. And just as nuclear-free cities built momentum towards a nuclear treaty, we're seeing city councils and subnational governments endorse this proposal and encourage their national governments to support it formally. So we've seen Sydney, Kolkata, Lima, London, Barcelona, Vancouver, Los Angeles, dozens of cities, I think about 90 around the world, have formally endorsed this proposal. We've also seen some subnational governments, so Niue, Hawaii, and most recently the state of California, the Australian Capital Territory, have formally supported the proposal. And so we're hoping today to see our first council in Aotearoa make quite a historic decision to support the proposal. And we hope that that can trigger a number of other city councils and governments in the region supporting it as well. We think this is really important solidarity with a proposal that has been spearheaded by Pacific Islands. They were the governments that first came up with the idea of a treaty on fossil fuels way back in 2015. And so, yeah, we're really excited about the potential here. I don't know, Tiana, you might want to add about the...
Yeah, kia ora, thank you, Michael. So we are bringing the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty movement to Aotearoa for a number of reasons. Mostly, Māori and Pacific communities already know what the impact of climate change is happening now, because it is happening now. And so what we're looking for is to stand alongside our South Pacific brothers and sisters and amplify their call for this movement to both get councils and then ultimately the government to pull this cause forward to create the treaty. It's really important, and one of the reasons why we're coming to you guys first is in the Kapiti Coast, you guys already know that the sea is on your doorstep, the ocean no moana, the big blue that all unites us is on your doorstep and is already impacting a lot of people in your community. You guys have already pushed for the climate crisis to be recognised as what it is, and so we're calling for your support to stand up and be first in Aotearoa to create a domino effect and hopefully get other councils to stand alongside us. Yeah, kia ora.
Thank you very much, Michael and Tiana. Another powerful presentation this morning. Do I have any questions from elected members? Councillor Pravanov.
thank you for coming online today to present this to us. I'm just interested to know, to me, this is actually not a local government matter. This is actually a national matter. So what's our government stance on this?
Kia ora, yeah, I can jump in there. So in the view of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty movement, we have had endorsement from over 90 cities worldwide. In terms of what the national government's stance on it at the moment, we do have support from individual parties and MPs, mainly Greens, Māori, and some other individual MPs. In terms of what the overall national government is, because of the election, a lot of them aren't ready to come forward and publicly announce till post-election, but a lot of them, this is on their agenda and is something that they're actively looking toward supporting post the election. So we, as a movement, want to create momentum regardless of what political way the election will come this weekend. And so we are moving forward as if this movement is going to take more than just the government to create momentum. So we're creating momentum locally before we can move nationally. Kia ora. And that's what we've seen successful in other regions.
Thanks, Councillor Bravano. Who have I got next?
I have another question. So I sent an email to councillors about actually looking, it's a great initiative. But basically we need to walk the talk rather than just endorse these things. We need to show by actions that we are actually supporting this by not travelling or basically being accountable for our travels. But that was not considered to be anything that this council wanted to consider. So how do you conciliate this matter when people are happy to say yes to a set of recommendations but not actually walk the talk?
I think that's a question for fellow councillors to discuss rather than a question for
Well, no, I think it's a philosophical.
I'll move on to the next.
We have had that come up from a few other councils. If it's helpful we do have something on that if it's useful. Just to quickly mention.
I'd prefer to stick to the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, which we've got on our agenda today. We've got a busy agenda, so I'm not willing to talk about fossil fuel use in general, but really to stick to the motion that's in front of us today. So I'll move on to the next question. Thanks. Councillor Coe.
Thank you. Look, you've explained that you are wanting to build significant momentum behind this initiative, which I applaud. Now, to me, that means getting our communities involved and engaged with this issue. So I'm just querying why we need to make a decision on this today rather than engaging with our community to build awareness and get their support behind the initiative. So would be interested in your comments on that. Thank you.
I think that's more a matter for debate amongst councillors rather than for Tiana.
Well, I'm just wanting to know why the urgency. Why do we need to make a decision today?
If you've got a comment on that, that would be great.
Yeah, part of the urgency is the Pacific Islands Forum Leaders Meeting happens in a month's time. And so a block of Pacific Island nation states will be taking this proposal to that meeting and hoping that all or as close to all nation states in the region formally support the proposal. We've actually seen my government, Australia, and unfortunately at times New Zealand, try water down text on this issue over recent months at some of the regional meetings in the lead up to the Pacific Island Forum. And so we're hoping to build as much advocacy and support for the proposal ahead of that meeting. And we're hoping that, that some New Zealand councils supporting the proposal would really help advocate towards the government's support at that meeting. And that's quite crucial timing because it's just ahead of COP28, so the UN climate talks taking place in Dubai in December, which will have a very strong focus on fossil fuel phase out. So there is a bit of urgency there, and that's why we were hoping some councils would support the proposal today and in the coming weeks. Of course, we also want to see momentum and support grow across communities more broadly. So Tiana and the team on the ground in Aotearoa are really scaling up quite a big campaign over the coming weeks and months. I think that'll be able to happen, as well as the council support.
Right, thank you.
Kia ora, just want to add there, we have regional activators across the motu that are increasing the awareness both locally and nationally.
Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, kia ora, Michael and Tiana, and I was just going to ask a quick partai about that sort of locally based and centred campaign in terms of the question that Councillor Coe raised about the education and awareness of our community as to this important issue and a really potential transformational solution to it. The other question that I did have, though, is the role that you would see us having if we did kind of seek to endorse the call for a treaty today on our role, in kind of putting pressure on other councils, and what sort of form you would see that taking, and sort of where you would like to see the campaign move from us potentially endorsing to kind of councils rippling off of our decision today.
Kia ora, yeah, I can jump in there. So just to broaden out what I said before, we have a bunch of regional activators, and it's a intergenerational, multidisciplined movement. So we have people from all walks of life and all career backgrounds jumping behind this movement, which is why we've seen such a global call out. In terms of the impact that Kapiti Coast being the first council endorsing an Aotearoa will have, is what we've seen with other councils is that they're ready to, but they maybe aren't quite keen to be the first. So once we have one, we can have many, and that's what we've seen in some of our conversations with other councils, is that they're ready to do so, but need others to build momentum there.
You need a first.
Yeah, and in other regions, we've seen the first council to endorse, in some cases, send a letter to other mayors or councils encouraging them to do the same, or councillors just contacting councillors that they know in other regions. And in some cases also writing a letter to relevant ministers on a national scale, just so making sure that the resolution's seen at that scale as well.
Yeah, maybe something to talk about at a sector level and national level at Local Government New Zealand too. So we'll certainly follow up in that regard. Councillor Warwick, if it passes today. Councillor Warwick?
I'm just, I'm not really, I haven't read enough on this, but does this cover fossil fuels in all of our other products, or is it just energy? Because we have petroleum in lots and lots of our products, including clothing and everything.
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, the treaty proposal is just looking at production of fossil fuels. So the extraction, mining, drilling, fracking for fossil fuels. It wouldn't be a treaty on the use of fossil fuels. So in some ways, the Paris Agreement, which is on emissions, does look at demand and use. So trying to transition vehicle fleets or agriculture or other emissions. A lot of that is covered under our current climate agreements, and because those emissions happen in a domestic framework. The challenge with production is that a lot of it is for export and import. So it cuts across national borders, which is something that atmosphere and physics doesn't recognise. So the challenge is this gap on the production and extraction of fossil fuels, which Aotearoa has transitioned away from in many cases compared to some other countries like my own. But there's still a need for action on extraction and production and exports of fossil fuels. But yeah, it wouldn't be around use of fossil fuels in things like clothing or local uses.
I'll just quickly jump in there too. With the upcoming election, two parties have already announced that should they get in, they will repeal New Zealand's offshore oil drilling ban, which is a grave state to be in, given where we already are. Given the Kapiti Coast has already declared the climate crisis an emergency, we want to continue the momentum, and yeah, tautoko your leadership in this area. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Rob?
Oh, thank you. Just
Councillor
a quick
Coker.
comment and a question. Personally, I think that we've got to look at the long-term view and where New Zealand is at in the greater scheme of things, and have a very, very clear and robust plan to phase out fossil fuels. But it has to be other things have to be factored into it. You can't just nail fossil fuels and go, or get rid of them. We really have to have a balanced look. But just a question, where does New Zealand farming fit into your proliferation philosophies?
Yeah, good question. So there are many different climate frameworks. This would just be explicitly looking at the extraction of coal, oil and gas. So it wouldn't cover farming activities, or that would not be something in the scope of this treaty. There'd be other climate frameworks that already exist or need to be negotiated locally on other climate impacts. But the extraction of coal, oil and gas are the primary cause of the climate crisis. And so there's an urgent need to fill that gap. And in some ways, definitely agree with you that part of why this treaty is needed is that we do need a plan for how to manage that transition carefully and globally. At the moment, by and large, that transition's been left to companies to decide on dates and the speed, left to the market. And we know that those companies and those markets aren't going to think about the impact of that transition on economies or workers or communities. They're going to be prioritising their own profits. And so really what we're saying is we do need a plan. That plan needs to happen on a local level, but it really does need to happen on a global scale as well, because there are, it's a global crisis and it's a global industry, and we need to negotiate a global treaty to navigate that transition.
Oh, thank you. That's a great answer. Thanks.
A lot of great answers. Thank you so much for your time today, Michael and Tiana. We'll just get through a few things in the living wage, and then we'll come to this after that. So thanks for your time today. Much appreciated.
Thanks, everyone.
So we move on to members' business. Do I have any leaves of absence requests? They can always come through the Mayor's office. I haven't been advised of any matters of an urgent nature. There's nothing under item 9 this time. We'll do a double one next time. So we move to reports. 10.1, becoming an accredited living wage employer. And we have Morag Tamialane.
Kia ora koutou, ko Morag Taimaliatano takuingoa. I'm here today to talk to the report about Kapiti Coast District Council becoming an accredited living wage employer. I'll try and quickly go through it because I know we're running a little bit late. But just in terms of the journey so far, so in terms of councils in the Wellington region, there's already been 3 that have become accredited. Wellington City Council in 2018, Hutt City Council in 2021 and Porirua City Council in 2022. So Kapiti Coast is currently one of the only that isn't accredited at the moment. Back in August 2022, Council brought forward a notice of motion, and through that agreed to support the principle of Council becoming a living wage employer. So the work that we've been doing since isn't anything to do with the value of the living wage, but more about how Council could become accredited and what that would look like. In December 2022, Council agreed to progress with investigating becoming an accredited living wage employer, and that was around an option that was focused solely on those contracts that we would need to understand better to become accredited. So not looking wider at this stage, but potentially looking wider after we've become accredited. So just quickly in terms of the criteria for being an accredited living wage employer, there's 4. One is that all directly employed workers are on the current living wage. The second is all indirectly paid workers employed by contractors who are delivering a service on a regular and ongoing basis, either on the current living wage or on a milestone agreed as part of the licence. The third is that employees have provided workers with access to a union. And the last one is that employees' terms and conditions have not been reduced in order to meet the current living wage rate. So that would be reduction of hours or other benefits in order to balance out the cost of increasing to the living wage. So as we, council officers, went through this process, at the time that the council had agreed for us to look into this, all council employees were paid the living wage. Then the new living wage was announced on the 1st of April, increasing it to $26 an hour, which was a 9.9% increase. So through this process and through the remuneration round, Council has or can confirm that all council employees are paid the living wage for 2023-24. So we do continue to meet criteria A. So that means that Council currently meets 3 of the 4 criteria. The one remaining criteria that we don't currently meet would be towards indirectly paid workers employed by contractors. So that's where the council employs a service on a regular and ongoing basis. It wouldn't be for project-based work or anything like that. It's, for example, cleaners, security guards we use, and through discussions with Living Wage Aotearoa as well, we've focused it down to identify contracts where service provision or industry is traditionally including low-wage positions. So as we worked through that, Finance pulled together a list of organisations that we contract with. We went through and we identified which ones were in scope in terms of being a regular and ongoing service. And we have connected with those organisations to understand whether they currently pay the living wage or whether there would need to be support to bring them to pay the living wage if the council chose to become an accredited employer. So out of the 57 or so that we started to look at, there were 5 contracts across 4 organisations where we would need to support them to be paying their staff the living wage. And in order to do that, the cost would be approximately $60,000. So that wouldn't currently be within budget. And so that is really what the basis of this paper is about. We also suggest in the paper that an additional $20,000 is agreed as a contingency amount, just as we go through the accreditation process in case there are any additional small contracts or anything that are identified that weren't identified in the initial round, or if anything's changed in terms of the contracts that we have with those services at the moment. So just very quickly in terms of the benefits of the living wage, it's been recognised internationally as a means to bring benefits to employers, the community and to the workers who need it most. We're very aware as we had this conversation internally that within some industries the council can struggle to find and contract the required level of service due to the industry having trouble in attracting and retaining staff. An example of this is within the cleaning industry, where we may need to contract with multiple providers to ensure that we can get the service that we need. And through discussions with other organisations who have become an accredited employer, we've heard clear examples of how suppliers have proactively engaged with the process as it helps them to retain or attract and retain staff and therefore provide a better service. We're also aware that as other councils within the region, as I noted before, are accredited living wage employers, we could be at a disadvantage because we are all trying to contract a lot of the same services when it comes to regular and ongoing services. So the recommended option that's gone up is around immediate accreditation. So this would be looking to change those contracts so that we can meet accreditation as they would be those regular and ongoing services, those 5 contracts that I spoke about would be paying their workers the living wage. This was considered by the Social Sustainability Subcommittee on the 14th of September, and they agreed with this recommendation. So this recommendation has now come up to Council for your consideration.
Kia ora, Morag. Do you have any questions? Councillor Wilson.
I just want to move it.
Never one to miss an opportunity.
We did have a lot of questions that were asked and answered at the Social Sustainability Committee where it passed, so I don't have any questions beyond that.
Yeah, I have Councillor Spires light on. Do you have a question, Councillor Spires? Before we move to...
well, I did have
moving
one,
and
but I just
seconding.
wanted to thank Morag for yesterday. We had a good discussion and answered most of my questions I had. But just to clarify, so most of the funding's going towards workers who work mainly for council staff. Yeah, but I just wanted to thank Morag for the time yesterday.
So just in response to that, so the $60,000 to $80,000, so that total amount that we're looking at there would be us speaking with suppliers that we contract on a regular ongoing basis who provide that service to us. So they're not directly employed by council, they're indirectly employed, but they provide a regular and ongoing service to council.
I thought your response was going to be, you're welcome. Councillor Kirby?
So just a quick question. You mentioned 4 organisations, 5 contracts. Have we had a positive response from all 4 organisations to our request?
Absolutely. So one of those organisations which hold 2 contracts is currently looking to make sure that all of their staff are paid the living wage, so they're proactively doing that, and they'll continue to engage with us as we're going through this process and as they are as well. And the other 3 are willing to do this as well. It's something that they have already done with other organisations that they contract with, so it's just in terms of us supporting them to do that through the increase in the cost of the contract.
Great, thank you.
Community Board Chair?
Yeah,
Glenn
just
Olsen?
a quick one. So the 60,000, just for an idea, how many people will be better off from that? So 60,000 is number, but do we actually know how many individuals in our area will be better off from this?
I actually couldn't answer that, sorry, and it wasn't something that we probably would have felt comfortable talking to that organisation about. When we spoke with them, we asked them whether they were currently paying the living wage, and if they said they hadn't, they gave us the figure in terms of increasing that. Anything more, and it might have felt like we might have had a bit too much information about some of their employers.
Lots, I think, is the answer. So we've got some recommendations in front of us, mainly noting recommendations, including noting that the Social Sustainability Committee, chaired by Martin Halliday, already considered this and decided that immediate accreditation was the preferred option, which is what we have under F. Agrees that living wage accreditation is sought via option A, immediate accreditation, which is the most proactive approach amongst the options presented by staff. So Councillor Wilson has indicated he'd like to move that. Councillor Handford is seconding. Right of introduction.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief because, as has been said, this was traversed quite well at the Social Sustainability Committee, and of course we've heard from our living wage group. Did want to just personally recognise Prue and Lindy, who have done a brilliant job over a long period of time in advancing this cause. It's called a living wage for a reason. Even the living wage is a really, really difficult for a lot of people to live on in the current environment. So anything less than that is just appalling in my view. And this paper doesn't reflect necessarily that personal view of mine, but it takes us a long way towards it. So this is an opportunity for us to put principles into practice, and I unhesitatingly recommend the from A through F.
Great. Any further comments? Yes, by Councillor Handford, who's now about to comment. Thanks for checking, Councillor Halliday.
I'm going to take that spot. Yeah, completely agree with everything that Councillor Wilson has said, and just to acknowledge Lindy and Finn and Prue and the rest of the team, Kamala, all of those who are standing alongside us in the chambers today for coming and for making a really impassioned case for the importance of the living wage, and not only for doing that kind of in our context today, but for kind of creating this movement and for leading the charge on it. And yeah, hopefully by us kind of seeking immediate accreditation, that'll only have positive ripple effects throughout our communities, both in terms of those who will be paid the living wage, but also other people seeing the leadership that council's taking and wanting to do the same. So that's the real goal, and I think any role that we can play in kind of telling that story, talking about the positive benefits and the flow-on effects is only going to be better for our community, and ultimately that's who we're here to serve. So I think this is an absolute no-brainer, and really excited that we've finally got into this point of hopefully signing off to seek that accreditation immediately as well. And I think that's crucial that we just get it done and just put that stake in the ground, and as Councillor Wilson said, put those principles first.
I just talk all of that and the comments of Councillor Wilson as well. I'm guessing a right of reply isn't required?
Just very briefly, I used to curse people for doing this, but I'm going to do it myself. Morag, brilliant job. putting this together. It's really important to have, this is one of those issues that really requires empathy and understanding with those people. And so thank you very much for that.
I think she's saying you're welcome. So I'll put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. And for those online who might not hear, we just had a rousing round of applause from the public gallery. Thank you for coming today. So before we move on, actually, I'm going to backtrack a little bit because I have an apology to add. Kim Tahiwi emailed through her apologies a little while ago and we didn't pick them up. So I'm just checking with the mover and the seconder of the apologies. Councillor Kirby, Councillor Hanford, you're happy to add that? I should put it to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. I'd also like to welcome Hurawai Paki, who some time ago joined the table from Ngāti Toa Rangatira, but didn't find a moment to acknowledge Hurawai's presence here today. Thank you for coming. So I'm now going to move on, while we've still got Tiana and Michael online, to the notice of motion for the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. Before we start a discussion on this, I was quite clear in question time, and I'll be quite clear during this process too, that what we've got in front of us is support for the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. That's not to say we have a lot of work that we're doing as a council in this space, reducing our emissions and with our climate strategy, which is underway, and with our vehicle fleet, all sorts of things we do in this space. And there's more that we could do, which we could discuss, but that's not the subject of what's in front of us today, which is why I was keeping it quite tight, because we could spend all day talking about ways that we could reduce our emissions and meet our climate change goals, but that's really the place for our climate think tank and for our strategy that we're going through at the moment. So I'm sure Sophie, you'll be very happy to update you on the work that we're doing in that area, Tiana and Michael, if you're not aware already, but today is not the time for that. So I'm just going to invite us to consider the motion that's in front of us today, 1 through 5. I'm guessing you'd like to move those, Sophie? And do I have a seconder? Councillor Halliday, right of introduction.
Cool, kia ora. I'll try and keep this relatively brief because I think Michael and Tiana did an awesome job at kind of outlining the need for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, but also in answering the questions that came to the fore this morning. And thank you all for your great questions. I know they were appreciated by the pair who were answering them. So as the Mayor's mentioned today, the motion on the table is asking us essentially to join a global campaign for climate justice by championing a call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty and being the first in Aotearoa New Zealand to do so, which I think is kind of an important thing to note in itself, because it presents a real opportunity for us to leverage our connections with other councils and put our place of climate action being really high up on our strategic priorities into practice and taking a stand on this issue. So we've been vocal champions of the need to transformationally address the climate crisis and to reduce emissions. We've declared a climate emergency. We have created the Climate Emergency Action Framework. We're setting up a climate action think tank. We are identifying climate action as one of our top strategic priorities. And I think this just sits super nicely alongside that and provides us with an opportunity to really put a stake in the ground on this issue and to also help encourage other councils to do the same. The reasons why this is so needed, as was mentioned, if we look at the climate crisis and its presence already in our midst, we're seeing it manifest in a number of different ways, and to get ahead of the curve and not just adapt, but to figure out how we can reduce our impact locally at a nationwide level and also globally is crucial, and something that Michael mentioned in response to Councillor Pravanov's question around what local councils can do to, I guess, embody the 3 pillars of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty at a local level. There is also a city's policy toolkit, which sits alongside the campaign for a global treaty, which we can definitely kind of do some reading up on and figure out how to weave those actions through either into avenues like our climate strategy or long-term plan. So this treaty, non-proliferation, preventing new coal, oil or gas developments, an equitable phase out and a just transition. So I fully think we're looking at kind of the whole package in terms of what this is calling for and what we're seeking from such a treaty. And if we think about our future generations and what they're going to need to inherit a livable planet, ultimately the proliferation of fossil fuels puts that at risk. And I think we have an obligation as leaders of our district to take action on this and to endorse it. So I'm encouraging you all to get behind it, and we heard why from Michael and Tiana this morning, so I think I'll leave it there. But yeah, really interested to hear the conversation, and hopefully this will gain your support.
Thank you, Councillor Hanford. I'm happy to support this today. I think part of our role as a council is to advocate for the things that we and our community feel strongly about, and this is certainly one of those times. So very happy to support it. I'm really interested to hear more about that toolkit, and I wonder if it's something that the Climate Think Tank could have a look at and see how they could maybe implement some of those actions and weave that into our work stream here. Mr. Mansell?
Thank you, Your Worship. This is probably more a question than outside the debate that we should be doing, but it does say in number 5, in the second part of the paragraph, implementing its proposed principles by agreeing to, and then it's got no new fossil fuel infrastructure. So it's actually asking the council to change its district plan and, for instance, prevent any more petrol stations being built, and then phasing out the existing petrol stations. If I read that correctly, I just wonder whether Sophie has any comment on that. I can understand the idea of acknowledging the fuel crisis and the responsibility of fossil fuels, but this seems to be going a step further than it says.
So I don't think it's a time for questions, but I would comment that that 5 calls upon our major cities. We're not a major city, and we're not the New Zealand government. What we're being asked to do today is to act in our advocacy role in terms of supporting this kaupapa. So I don't think we would be committing ourselves to any changes in the consents or anything like that that we give out. Who's next?
I just wonder if that's a little two-faced. We're not prepared to do it, but we're asking everyone else to.
Okay. Next. Councillor Warwick.
I feel really uncomfortable because I don't know enough about it to vote on it. But also, I think, the whole phasing out of fossil fuels, when you look at what we have in this room, a lot of it is made with fossil fuels, petroleum, everything. So what are we going to replace it with? And we've got no date or anything. So for me, I won't be supporting this because I just don't know enough about it, and I don't think that. I don't know how we're going to do that.
Councillor Spires.
Thank you. I support what Councillor Warwick has just said, but also, are we setting council up for ongoing costs, or is this just a sign and walk away?
It's just a sign.
I don't think there are any costs associated with this, no. Mr. Olsen?
Yeah, actually a little bit in line with Richard. On 5A, the way it's written does not actually align with the proposed Non-Proliferation Treaty, because at the moment, as Richard pointed out, it does say no new fossil fuel infrastructure, where actually the treaty for that one says an immediate end to the expansion of new coal, oil and gas production. So the very different thing that's been proposed to what's actually on the treaty. Treaty is talking about the end of production and exploring, whereas the way it's written, as Richard pointed out, would actually cover things like, new infrastructure like petrol station stuff. So I would say that while I do support it, I don't support it that written like that. I would, if it was me, I would support it as it is worded for the treaty, because it seems that the scope has got a bit wider than it needs to be or
I'll
should
go
be.
to Councillor Handford because she might have a solution there.
So, if I'm correct, the main point that there's concern around just from from those few comments is 5A, the no new fossil fuel infrastructure. I think, as Michael made quite clear, the purpose of including that is in terms of infrastructure to extract and explore for fossil fuels. So, if it was changed to something like no new exploration or extraction fossil fuel infrastructure or something of the like, would that cover off
For me, if it could match
concerns?
the wording, because we are, voting on supporting the treaty, so in which case, to me, it should match what the treaty is saying. That 3 pillars, and that is the pillar 1, so I think it should match their wording because that's what you're voting on.
So if we could change the word infrastructure to production, and so if you could accept that, then would that maybe solve that problem? Sorry, Michael, we're through public speaking time and we're in debate, so there's no further input from members of the public. Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, hi, I won't be supporting this. I think there's a whole bunch of ideology in here. For me, here's a great idea. Let's not dig up any coal in New Zealand and import dirty, stinking, filthy coal from Indonesia, and at the same time support an undemocratic government. So I think we need to be very careful when we start signing up to ideology. I've had a look at the website, and there's some pretty broad sweeping statements. Some would argue one person's disinformation is another person's truth. And listening to Mr. Mansell and Glenn, they bring up some very good points. We don't even know what we're supporting here. It's ideology based. I don't think it's evidence based. So I'll be definitely voting against this. Thank you.
Councillor Kirby.
I'd also just support the change of wording in A, and would suggest that we just use on the website, if you're going to put it in, it just says by ending the expansion of coal, oil and gas production. So we actually represent the treaty well. I have some questions around the implications of us supporting this in terms of what then rolls out. I get what we're trying to do. But I have lots of questions around renewable sources and the costs of those and how that happens and who pays for it and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, I'm still sitting in a moment where I'm not sure about where we land on this one myself. So I'm listening to the debate interested. Thank you.
Councillor Coe.
Thank you. As the Mayor has pointed out, our role is to be advocates on behalf of our community. I don't have a good feeling of what our community might say about this proposal, and I think it needs further deliberation before we were to make a decision as to whether to support it or not. To me, it is, the question is, do we want to be seen to be taking a leading role in what is climate activism? And it is ideological. It's making a statement as opposed to really having any sort of practical implications. But I do think we need to be more aware of what we're actually agreeing to, what the implications are, and we need to certainly be engaging with our community because, as these people have said, this requires some momentum, and community support. I'd like some time to engage with the community on this matter before making a decision. So I will not be voting in favour of this recommendation, of this motion.
Councillor Handford, I'm hearing around the table so far that people feel like they haven't had enough time to absorb this and have enough information around it and the implications it has for our council. I'm just wondering if you'd like to let it lie on the table so that you have more time to talk to people about it, because I think people are wanting more information. Or would you just like to let it roll today? Okay. Councillor Halliday.
few things, but my first one is around questioning when a motion's brought to the table. As Mr. Mansell just tried then, we don't really have a space to ask questions. I'm just wondering if that could be addressed as we move forward. We tend to get the motion and go straight into debate. We don't tend to have a question session because it's not a report that's been delivered as such.
Yeah, that's the nature of a notice of motion, unfortunately, Councillor Halliday.
Okay, that's cool. Where to start with this one? We've declared a climate emergency. In my opinion, things aren't happening fast enough. Yes, it is ideological. Let's face it, New Zealand on a world scale isn't going to make any impact in this conversation at all with regards to action we take. The area that we can make a difference is influence. It is making statements and it is sort of leading, I guess, perhaps where others fear to tread in the initial sense, because there aren't necessarily right or wrong answers here. There are all sorts of answers. There are all sorts of... first question I would have had to the gentleman that presented was, well, okay, if we're going to be looking at knocking this on the head, and this is the hard fuel conversation versus your natural fuel conversation. In other words, if there's no wind, if there's no rain, if there's no sun, where does the power come from? So are we talking nuclear options? Are we talking fusion options? Are we talking all sorts of other different options? And maybe even technologies that haven't even been invented yet, I don't know. But the thing is that we need to be making statements, but we need to be doing more than just making statements. We actually need to be doing stuff, because everyone's holding back here, and that really concerns me. I appreciate that there's maybe some unintended consequence here. I'd be more than happy to have this sitting on the table as long as we do start addressing this stuff. Okay, because everyone else is putting it in a corner. A lot of people are putting it in a corner and putting it in the too hard basket. Okay, we've done a lot in this council with regards to getting our footprint down. I think we've done a magnificent job in that space. But there's sustainability, there's other things going on, but our communities need to be buying into this, and the only way they're going to be buying into this is if we put this into the public arena, if we debate it in the public arena, and if we make people aware of it. But this stuff's turning up. It's as simple as that, and we either do something about this or we don't, but it's our kids, our grandkids that will suffer from this. So at this stage, I'm happy to leave it sitting on the table because and have some more discussion around this. I don't think we're going to get this across the table today. I will be voting to support it because we need to be making statements. I do note Councillor Provanov put through something which made me feel a little bit uncomfortable with regards to our own carbon footprint measuring and that sort of stuff. Maybe that's the first step that we need to take as such. But we need to be leading here. And to me, this is leading this stuff. And yes, there'll be bits and pieces that we might not completely agree with that need to be ironed out with regards to our obligations, but we need to be leading in this space, in my opinion. So I will be voting to support this.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just a couple of observations. I thought the statement that Michael made that I'm not sure everybody heard it, but it was that the atmosphere and physics don't recognise national borders. He's completely right about that, of course. If you think you live on the Kapiti Coast, just zoom out. It's a planet. So there aren't any borders. One of the realities that we will face as a country will be climate refugees. So if you look at what this is, who this is immediately addressing, so many of the island nations are actually getting wiped out by this. This is not speculation about what will happen in the future. It's actually happening now. So climate refugees are a reality, and New Zealand will be the beneficiary of so many of those refugees in time. This isn't asking the Kapiti Coast District Council to write a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. This is a really big thing. It's just, if you look at the big picture, what this is saying, do you support getting out of fossil fuels? It's a pretty simple question. Well, obviously I do. I thought everybody did. In fact, this council officially does. It's a climate emergency council. So, yeah, it isn't asking us to wordsmith a really complex treaty. It's just saying, do you broadly support this? Well, of course we do. Why wouldn't we? It's crazy not to. Because what's the alternative? The alternative is saying, no, no, no. We think, hang on, there could be some good stuff in this fossil fuels. Let's keep going with that. Well, now we're the British government. So let's not do that. They're being ridiculed right around the world as we speak. So we have an opportunity to say, let's support something that broadly philosophically the council already agrees with.
Thank you, Nigel. I have to say I agree. Councillor Pravanov?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Sophie, for bringing this forward, and from Councillor Halliday for seconding this. I certainly agree that we have got to look at matters like this which impact on our climate. But saying that, I think that this motion is actually poorly thought out, particularly point 5, when it talks about new fossil fuel infrastructure, and also it says setting fair and clear timelines to phase out existing infrastructure in line with the Paris goals, whatever they are. As I mentioned in my email, this is actually about not just very easily ticking a box saying, yes, we have agreed to this motion. It's about walking the talk. Obviously, there is not any great desire around this table by councillors to do that. And I have to say, and I'm sorry about this.
No, Councillor Pravanov, I think that's an unfair assertion against councillors.
Okay, I will continue. I will continue on.
There is no basis for that.
So this council does not have a climate change strategy. We're in the process of doing that. And this is actually a golden opportunity to raise some of these matters through that. And so without that strategy, we don't actually know what our community is actually viewing on this and where we're going to land on this. So I think that is the prime opportunity to make this change, make considerations in there. The other thing is too that we have a number of buildings which use fossil fuels to heat, and I think that is something that as councillors we need to consider about whether this is actually walking the talk as well. I know it costs money, but that's basically what it comes down to. So at the end of the day, I will not be supporting this motion, even though I agree with the principles of it. I think it's poorly planned, and we don't actually have the view of our communities. Thank you.
Skating the line of a bit of a lack of respect there, Councillor Pravanov. I'll move on to Councillor Cofford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just alluded to a question before about, a statement about a program for this sort of non-fossil fuel proliferation. Having just been to Europe, having just cycled across Italy and walked across England, seeing the vapour trails everywhere, seeing the smoking, the vaping, the big 60-seater buses everywhere, people walking around, millions and millions of people. Thank God we've got something like this motion before us today. And I would say that it has a safety valve in it with number 5 there, and it has the setting fair and clear timeframes to phase out existing infrastructure. That's where my program thing comes in. You've got to have a very clear program, though, about when you phase out the fossil fuel things, and it's got to be very clear, and you've got to not hit the New Zealand farmers. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Larissy.
Yeah, just for the record, I have a very strong branch of Tokoloan in my family, and I've been raised in an environment surrounded by Pacifica people, so I'm very aware of the plight that some of these island nations are facing, and it seems to have a particular focus on island nations, this treaty, certainly support many of the goals that my ward councillor is pushing, and her activism generally. Seeing as there's a chance for this to sit on the table, there is one thing that I just would like to say. Given that it does have a focus on island nations, I would think if we're going to be thought leaders on this, we would want to be sure that they support it themselves before we push it on the community. And we have, I think the website said 8 nation states supporting this. The speaker today did say that the Pacific Island Forum's more islands will be coming on board. So I think it's a little bit horse before cart for us to push this on the community before those communities themselves have said they want it. That's kind of my main input there.
Okay, right of reply, Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, kia ora. It's been interesting to listen to the commentary around the table. I would just say that we can't have it both ways. If we identify that the climate crisis is an emergency and we have an opportunity right in front of us to make a clear declaration that fossil fuel, the expansion of the production of fossil fuels has no place in the future when we already have more in our reserves than we can afford to burn. We don't need to explore for and extract more fossil fuels. We can't have it both ways. Do we think climate change is an emergency or do we not? Because we can't make statements like that, identify it as one of our top 10 priorities, have backing from the community, and we're having conversations with the community about those strategic priorities now, and there hasn't been raised with us people saying, oh no, climate change is not something that's worth focusing on. Sure, there are differing views on how we should respond to the climate crisis and what kind of solutions we should champion and lead forth. But I think around this table, we can't have it both ways. And I think the comments around this potentially being an ideological motion and decision, I look forward to the conversations then through the long-term plan where people are really keen to really up our investment in initiatives which reduce emissions, because we ultimately do have to put our money where our mouths are. And I completely acknowledge that and encourage all of us to get right amongst that and look at what we can do both within our council's emissions profile, but also that of the wider community. So I think if we're concerned about that, then we really have to, through the long-term plan, challenge ourselves and look at ourselves in the mirror and make sure we are doing everything that we can to reduce emissions. If you're not supportive of that, then if you're not supportive of this, then I damn hope you're supportive of that increased investment in initiatives which reduce our emissions. The comments around this not being evidence-based, when we look at the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere currently and the rate at which the temperatures are rising due to the proliferation of fossil fuels and the increased burning of fossil fuels, this is entirely evidence-based. That's the entire reason why it's on the table today, and the reason why the climate crisis at many levels, including the UN, has been identified as the challenge of our time, the defining moment of history, code red for humanity. And if we're not going to stand up and say that something needs to be done, then I think, is that leadership? I really don't think it is. So I would encourage all of us to think about the opportunity this presents for us to send a clear message. One, as Councillor Wilson said, we've actually already sent to our community. This is just an extension of that. And it would be a real shame if we were not able to get this over the line today, but I would not at all want to see that as being our last attempt. I think we can continue the conversation, we should continue the conversation and bring it back, but I would still like to see it voted on today just to see how we go. Kia ora.
Brilliant. I'll put it to the vote then. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Okay, call for a division.
Yeah.
All in... Oh, hang on. Glenn, what's your vote there?
Oh, yes, I was just voting against. Thank you. Just
Yeah, we got...
my meet
for
was late.
against.
My unmute was late.
Okay, so we'll note that when we call the division. All those who voted in favour, please raise your hands. And Chief Executive is taking a note, but for the audio record, the Mayor, Councillor Hanford, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Kirby, Councillor Halliday, Councillor Coford. Against? Councillor Spires, Councillor Coe, Councillor Warwick, Councillor Pravanov and Councillor Cooper.
Can I just have your hands up again, please, those against?
That is carried. Congratulations, Councillor Hanford, on a well-crafted, and I'll just note that we have replaced the word infrastructure with production. I think the rest of it's covered in terms of it referring to the original treaty. So congratulations, and thanks for your input on this today, Michael and Tiana. And it's certainly been a robust and interesting discussion. And I think the split vote today is no reflection on our commitment to our climate emergency goals. Just really a discussion about our role within that in terms of advocacy for things like this, which is always a little bit contentious in our council, where we like to think of what we do rather than what we say externally, potentially. So congratulations, Councillor Hanford, and we'll move on. We're going to try and get through one more paper before we take a short break, and that is submission on electoral lowering voting age for local elections and polls. I'll tell you what, if we haven't got through this paper by 11:05, we'll take a break regardless. How's that? There's a little incentive for everybody.
Kia ora koutou. I'll just present this on behalf of Steffi, as she is off overseas having fun somewhere. So this report just seeks Council's endorsement on the submission on the Electoral Lowering the Voting Age for Local Elections and Polls legislation bill, which is appended to the report. And I'd like to mostly take the report as read, but just point out that this submission was actually generated based on a notice of motion that was brought before Council back in December 2022 by Councillor Sophie Hanford, recommending that we support the Make It 16 campaign. So that is what has prompted us to draft this submission and bring it before you today for endorsement. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Any questions on the report that's in front of us today? There don't appear to be any. Noting that this is a submission based on a clear direction from the council previously. Okay, Councillor Hanford's happy to move. Councillor Wilson to second. Right of introduction.
Just to say thank you, and the submission looks great, nice and clear, succinct, and gets the message across that 16-year-olds should have the right to vote, which we've already agreed as a table we support. So completely back the submission, and thanks for the work on it.
Anybody else would like to contribute to the debate today? Councillor Wilson.
Just very briefly, supporting radical councillor. Yeah, again, no-brainer. The 16 and 17-year-olds are well onto it. And somebody had said one of the arguments against this is, 16, they're just slouching around the place. Well, they're not. They're the ones they're not going to vote, right? It's just like everyone who's of the legal age to vote now. Well, in local government, depending on where you come from, most of them don't vote now. So, right, so it's not like what we're doing is saying, we're going to get a whole bunch of dumb kids who are going to now vote. Well, probably not. The ones who are aware, they are going to vote. Why wouldn't you encourage that? We absolutely should be encouraging it. So, 100%. I'm just surprised that there isn't a cut-off at the top end, quite frankly.
Don't go there, Councillor Wilson.
I wasn't going to specify.
Okay. I'm going. Point of order, irrelevant.
I wasn't going to specify a name.
Okay.
Well, hey, listen, we all know someone, don't we?
Okay, I'll move on to Councillor Halliday, who I'm sure would never make a comment like that.
Look, just noting point 6, that the Supreme Court has made a judgment on this as well. I just wanted to comment, it's a nice, simple submission, but it gets to the point. And that's all you need to do. Sometimes you can cloud all of this sort of stuff with words and jargon, but this is just a very, very simple submission. I think it's excellent. So thank you very much.
Simple but not simplistic. Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. So I voted against this, and I'm going to be consistent by voting against this today, and I suppose my view has been borne out by the discussions in our family in relation to the upcoming elections, and that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you for your contribution, Councillor Pavanoff. Councillor Coe.
There seems to be a bit of confusion around the table here. We're not debating whether we make a submission or not. We're debating whether this is the submission that we're going to send in. And I think it's as simple as that. Unless we have any problems with the wording, we've already committed to this, so let's just go with it.
Well said, Councillor Coe. So, right of reply, waived. I'll put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's. So I'll note that Councillor Pavanoff voted against. So I'll now call the names, and the Chief Executive will take a note in his own time. So in favour, the Mayor, Councillor Handford, Councillor Spires, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Coe. Okay, against. Okay, better put up our hands. The Mayor, Councillor Handford, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Coe, Councillor Warwick, Councillor Coford, Councillor Halliday, Councillor Kirby, Councillor Cooper. Yep. And against, Councillor Spires and Councillor Pavanoff. So if you just note who's against. And we'll take a short break.
Can you just put me down as abstaining? Thanks. I'll go neutral.
Councillor Cooper is abstaining.
Thank you.
Must be a split conversation at home.
Thank you. We'll now take a 15-minute break. A 10-minute break, which means 15.